The air in the orbital shipyard tasted of recycled ozone and old grease, a flavor Rylan Voss had associated with failure for the last 5 years. He wiped his hands on a rag that was arguably dirtier than his fingers and looked at the message glowing on his retinal display. It was a contract offer, encoded with a high-level coalition intelligence cipher he had not seen since he walked away from the service. The sum attached to the file was enough to clear his debts twice over, but the sender was what made his stomach turn. It was just a set of coordinates and a verification code, but Rylan knew the signature. It was the kind of job that usually ended with a closed casket, provided they found enough of you to bury. Rylan worked salvage contracts on the fringe, pulling copper and fusion cores out of dead starships that orbited gas giants in the middle of nowhere. It was honest work, or at least honest enough to let him sleep without nightmares of burning cities. But the message insisted, one last job. Inspect an alien war asset on a seized dreadnought. Verify restraints are intact. Sign the paper. Walk away rich. He took the shuttle 3 hours later. The target vessel was the coalition dreadnought Iron Will, a massive slab of gunmetal gray drifting in a geostationary hold over a restricted moon. As Rylan's shuttle docked, the first thing that hit him was the silence. A dreadnought of this class should have been thrumming with the vibration of 3,000 crew members. The clang of maintenance lifts and the constant hum of standby reactors. Instead, the corridors were empty. The air scrubbers were running on low power, leaving the atmosphere stale and cold. It felt less like a military vessel and more like a tomb that had been scrubbed clean with bleach. He met his contact at the security checkpoint. The man was a handler Rylan recognized only by the sharp cut of his gray suit and the dead look in his eyes. The handler did not offer a name, just a plastic key card and a gesture toward the heavy blast doors of Hangar Bay 4. There are too few guards, Rylan thought as he walked. He counted only 2 sentries at the airlock and 1 at the elevator. For a prisoner classified as a war asset, there should have been a battalion. The whole thing smelled of staged procedure, like a crime scene dressed up as policy to fool the cameras. The blast doors hissed open, revealing a cavernous hangar bay that had been converted into a high-tech holding cell. In the center of the room, surrounded by a ring of portable gravity generators and suppression pylons, stood the prisoner. Rylan stopped. He had seen aliens before. He had seen Ver Dominion soldiers in the vid feeds from the border skirmishes. But he had never seen anything like Kalith. She was tall, standing nearly 7 feet even with her posture forced into a slouch by the heavy rig on her shoulders. She was breathtaking in a way that had nothing to do with human standards of beauty and everything to do with the terrifying perfection of a predator. She wore ceremonial armor plates that looked like obsidian glass, but where human armor would be strapped on. These plates seemed fused to her skin, growing out of her shoulders and forearms like a second skeleton. But it was the machinery that drew Rylan's professional eye. Massive magnetic locks clamped her wrists together in front of her waist. A heavy neural shackle rig was bolted around her throat and base of her skull, pulsating with a sick, yellow light. Cables ran from the collar to the floor, tethering her like a rabid animal. The rig was designed to dampen muscle output and throttle speech, turning a warrior capable of tearing through bulkhead doors into a prisoner who could barely lift her head. She heard him enter. Her head snapped up, the movement jerky and resistant against the collar's weight. Her eyes were solid gold. No iris, no pupil. Just a burning well of intelligence that swept over him. She studied him with predatory calm, assessing his threat level in a microsecond, and then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a blade finding a gap in armor. Run the diagnostic, the handler said from the safety of the observation deck above. We need verification that the voltage regulators are holding before the transfer. Rylan approached her slowly, his datapad in hand. He kept his distance, staying just outside the reach of her long arms. He plugged his diagnostic cable into the port on the back of her collar. The readout scrolled across his screen, a waterfall of technical data. Restraint integrity at 100%, neural dampening at maximum, muscle output reduced to 5% of baseline. But then he saw the secondary code. Rylan frowned, tapping the screen. There was a ghost signal running underneath the standard restraint protocols. He isolated the line of code and felt a chill go down his spine. It was a remote command channel, hidden inside the firmware. And buried in that channel was a compliance program linked directly to the vagus nerve stimulators in the collar. It was not just a restraint. It was a kill switch. A command sent on that frequency would not just stun her, it would stop her heart. The prisoner leaned forward as far as the shackles would allow. The cables pulled taut, humming with tension. Rylan looked up and locked eyes with her. She spoke, her voice roughened by the collar's choke field, sounding like grinding stones. Unshackle me. I will show you a real woman. The words hung in the empty air of the hangar. Rylan froze. It was such a bizarre thing to say. A threat, a boast, a seduction. It sounded like a line from a bad drama, but the way she said it, with such visceral intensity, made it brand itself into his memory instantly. Said the alien warrior, Rylan thought, finishing the sentence in his own head as he stared at her. He tried to keep his professional distance. He was a contractor. He was here to fix the machine, not the morality. But he could not ignore the contradiction staring him in the face. This was a prisoner allegedly too dangerous to live. The butcher of a border colony according to the news feeds. And yet she was restrained with technology meant for control, not safety. If she were truly a monster, they would have put her in stasis. You do not put a leash on a nuclear bomb. You disarm it. This is torture, Rylan muttered, barely audible. The handler's voice boomed over the intercom. Status, Mr. Voss. Rylan hesitated. There is a signal variance in the regulator. He lied smoothly. I need to calibrate the feedback loop. Do it quickly, the handler replied. Suddenly, the handler punched a command into his console in the booth above. It was a test, a brief flicker of the compliance program. Kalith's body convulsed, her back arched, the fused armor plates grinding against each other with the sound of cracking bone. She did not scream. She refused to scream. She bit down on her lip until purple blood ran down her chin, her body flinching violently against her will as the collar sent liquid fire through her nervous system. It lasted 3 seconds. When it stopped, she slumped forward, panting, sweat shimmering on her dark skin. She looked up at Rylan, her golden eyes burning with hate. You humans, she rasped, spitting a glob of blood onto the pristine deck. You worship freedom in your songs, and then you build such pretty cages. The humor was sharp, a jagged piece of glass, but Rylan could see the hurt underneath. It was not the physical pain. It was the humiliation. She was a captain of the Vare Dominion, a creature of honor and strength, being reduced to a puppet that twitched on a wire. Rylan turned his back to the camera, pretending to adjust a cable on the floor. He pulled up the ship's logs on his datapad, bypassing the standard encryption with a salvage breaker he used for hacking abandoned airlocks. He scrolled through the data. The timestamp on the prisoner's transfer was wrong. The camera feeds from the hangar for the last 24 hours were missing, and the chain of custody authorization did not come from the military high command. It pointed to a subcommittee within the Senate Security Council. This was not a military holding action. This was a black site operation. The heavy blast doors at the far end of the hangar hissed. Ryland checked his watch. The extraction team was not due for another 2 hours. A squad of 6 men marched in. They wore unmarked combat armor and carried heavy pulse rifles. They did not move like prison guards. They moved like cleaners. The lead man carried a data pad with authorization codes that Ryland's scanner picked up immediately. They were overriding the hangar locks. This is not oversight, Ryland realized, his heart hammering against his ribs. This is an execution. They were going to kill her, wipe the logs, and claim she tried to escape. Ryland was just here to make sure the malfunction looked plausible in the report. He was the scapegoat's witness. Kalith watched the new arrivals. She did not look afraid. She looked resigned. She shifted her gaze to Ryland, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. "I was on a diplomatic escort mission," she said quietly. "Not a raid." Ryland kept working on the panel, his hands shaking slightly. "The news said you destroyed the colony at Sigma 9. My ship jumped away 4 hours before the massacre began." She replied, "The timestamps on my flight recorder would prove it. But those records have likely been incinerated by now." Ryland looked at the approaching squad. They were setting up a perimeter. The leader was checking his weapon. "That's why, tell me," Ryland whispered. "Because you looked at the monitor," she said. "You saw the command code. You know what this is." Ryland hesitated. He was trapped. If he did nothing, she died. And he probably died too. A loose end tied up in the silence of space. If he acted, he was committing treason against the coalition. He was trapped between fear and decency, a place he had spent most of his adult life trying to avoid. Kalith kept talking, her voice a mix of taunt and plea. "Do you know what your Senate does to women they cannot categorize? Human. If we are strong, we are monsters. If we are beautiful, we are trophies. If we are righteous, we are saints. They cannot stand a woman who is just herself. So they break us until we fit the box." The lead soldier shouted across the bay. "Step away from the prisoner, engineer." Ryland looked at Kalith. She looked back, her chin high, defying them to the end. "I will make you a bargain," Ryland said, his voice low. Kalith raised an eyebrow. "I free you," Ryland said, "but you swear on your warrior oath. You do not kill the first person who annoys you." Kalith smirked, and for a second, the predator looked almost amused. "That will be nearly everyone, engineer. Swear it," Ryland hissed. "No bloodbath. We escape. We do not slaughter." "I swear," she said. "I want agency, not rescue. I will not kill them. But I will make them wish they had stayed in bed." Ryland turned back to the console on the floor. He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a salvage tool, a heavy-duty quantum cutter designed to slice through starship hulls. "Step away!" the soldier yelled, raising his rifle. Ryland jammed the cutter into the command node of the restraint pylon. He did not have time to hack it. He had to sever the connection physically without triggering the kill routine. It was like trying to defuse a bomb with a sledgehammer. He triggered the cutter. The blade of coherent light screamed as it bit into the metal. Sparks showered over his hands, burning his skin. The handler in the booth screamed, "He is cutting the line. Killer, execute command." The soldiers opened fire. Pulse blasts slammed into the floor around Ryland. Ryland twisted the cutter, ripping through the optical cabling. The command channel severed a fraction of a second before the kill signal could reach the collar. The yellow light on Kalith's throat died. The heavy magnetic clamps on her wrists disengaged with a thunderous clack. Kalith inhaled. It was a sound like a vacuum breach, a massive intake of air into lungs that had been starved for days. Her strength returned in a violent, stunning surge. The air around her seemed to warp as her bioelectric field reasserted itself. She staggered, dropping to one knee, breathing like she was tasting oxygen for the first time in her life. Then she steadied. She stood up. She wiped the blood from her chin. Her eyes were wet, not with tears of sadness, but with a rage so profound she refused to gift the room with the sight of it spilling over. The execution team breached the inner circle, firing wildly. Kalith moved. It was not movement as Rylan understood it. It was controlled lightning. She did not run. She flowed. She ducked under a pulse blast that should have taken her head off, moving faster than the human eye could track. She closed the distance to the first soldier in a single stride. She did not kill him. She grabbed his rifle barrel with one hand and twisted. The hardened alloy crumpled like tin foil. She swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing into the wall with enough force to crack the plating, but not his skull. She was a blur of obsidian armor and kinetic force. She disarmed the second man, tossing his weapon across the hangar. She kicked the third man in the chest, sending him sliding 20 meters across the deck, gasping for air but alive. She was honoring the bargain. She was leaving them trembling, humbled, and broken, but breathing. Rylan scrambled to his feet, dodging a stray shot. "We have to go!" Kalith grabbed the squad leader by the throat, lifted him 1 foot off the ground, glared into his terrified eyes, and then dropped him gently, patting him on the cheek with mocking tenderness. "Run, little man," she whispered. She turned to Rylan. "The hangar doors?" "Override is locked," Rylan shouted. "We need a ship." There was a courier craft docked on the secondary pad, a sleek, fast blockade runner used for high-priority intel. Kalith sprinted toward it, Rylan struggling to keep up. She hit the airlock release with a fist, shattering the keypad and forcing the door to cycle. They threw themselves into the cockpit. The interior was cramped, smelling of new leather and coffee. Kalith slid into the pilot's seat. Her large hands flew over the controls. "Can you fly this?" Rylan yelled, strapping himself into the co-pilot chair. "It is a standard coalition interface," she said, her fingers blurring across the holographic displays. "It is clumsy, slow, and illogical, just like its makers." The engines roared to life. The hangar bay doors began to close as the backup security protocols kicked in. "Hold on," she said. She slammed the throttle forward. The courier ship shot forward, scraping the closing doors with a screech of tearing metal. They burst out of the hangar and into the black void of space. Rylan fumbled with the unfamiliar comms controls. "I need to jam their tracking signal." Kalith banked the ship hard to the left, dodging a salvo of defensive turret fire from the dreadnought's hull. "Do not jam it. Let them see us go. I want them to know who beat them." Rylan managed to bring up the navigation computer. He was sweating profusely. "And where are we going?" "Anywhere but here," she said. She punched in a sequence of coordinates with alien instincts, ignoring the flight assist. The ship shuddered as the warp drive spun up. Rylan watched the rear monitor. The dreadnought was turning, its massive batteries locking onto them. "Jump!" Rylan screamed. Kalith laughed. It was a wild, playful sound that seemed completely out of place in a life-or-death chase. She slapped the engagement switch. The stars stretched into lines of infinite light. The G-force slammed Rylan back into his seat, squeezing the air out of his lungs. And then, silence. They were in the slipstream, safe in the white noise of hyperspace. Rylan slumped forward, his heart rattling against his ribcage like a trapped bird. He looked at the console. A red light was blinking. Message from Coalition Intelligence, Rylan said, his voice hollow. Read it, Kalith said, adjusting the trim on the stabilizers. Rylan read the scrolling text. Subject, Rylan Voss. Status, traitor. Kill on sight. Priority 1. He swallowed hard. He had just thrown away his life, his career, his safety, his citizenship, all gone in 10 minutes of madness. He looked at the second notification. Subject, Kalith. Status, rogue warbride assassin. Wanted for the murder of the Sigma-9 colony. Extreme danger. They are calling you a warbride, Rylan said, and an assassin. Kalith snorted. Of course they are. Warbride implies I belong to someone. Assassin implies I kill for money. Both are lies designed to dehumanize me. If they called me captain, they would have to admit I am a soldier. If they called me a woman, they would have to admit I have a soul. So, they use labels that make me easy to hate. It sells the war they want to start. She engaged the autopilot and spun her chair around to face him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her looking exhausted. The bruises on her throat where the collar had been were turning a dark, angry purple. Her wrists were raw and bleeding. Rylan looked at her. Are you okay? Kalith touched the bruises on her neck tentatively. She winced, but her expression remained stoic. She looked at Rylan, her golden eyes softening just a fraction. You gave up everything back there, she said quietly. Why? Rylan looked at his hands. They were still shaking. I don't know. Maybe I just got tired of tightening the bolts on the cages. Kalith nodded slowly. She leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. Freedom is not a gift. Rylan Voss, she said, her voice barely a whisper over the hum of the engine. It is not something you are given because you were good. It is a choice you bleed for. Today, you bled. Rylan looked out the viewport at the swirling tunnel of hyperspace. He was a traitor. He was a fugitive. He was alone in a stolen ship with an alien warrior who could snap him in half. He had never felt more awake. Where do we go now? He asked. Kalith opened one eye and smirked. To the only place where the truth still has a price, she said. Gallowglass Station, Rylan groaned. That is a death trap. It is a start, she said. She turned back to the console, her silhouette sharp against the starlight, unshackled, dangerous, and for the first time since he met her, real. Gallowglass Station was not a place you went to live, it was a place you went to disappear, provided you could afford the rent on a hole in the wall. The station was a massive spinning needle of durasteel and refuse orbiting a brown dwarf star. A trade labyrinth that operated outside the jurisdiction of the Coalition and the Dominion alike. It was a neon spine of black markets, unauthorized temples, and corporate neutral zones where the only law was the contract you signed, and the only police were the private security firms that enforced the fine print. Rylan Voss piloted the stolen courier ship into a dense traffic lane of bulk freighters and salvage tugs, hoping the sheer volume of metal would mask their heat signature. He docked in a low-rent bay that smelled of sulfur and burning plastic, paying the harbor master with a credit chip he had scrubbed of digital fingerprints hours ago. They stepped out into the crushing humidity of the station's lower ring. The air was thick with the scent of spices, sweat, and ozone. Holographic advertisements screamed from every surface, selling everything from gene-mod cosmetics to indentured servant contracts. Kalith walked beside him, wrapped in a heavy scavenger's cloak Rylan had found in the ship's emergency locker. It did a poor job of hiding her height, but the hood shadowed her face. Even so, she drew looks. She moved with a prowling grace that the local dock workers, shuffling under the weight of gravity and fatigue, simply did not possess. We need identity chips, Rylan murmured, keeping his head down as they navigated a crowded bazaar. If we try to leave the sector without a transponder code, the jump gate cannons will vaporize us. Kaleth did not answer immediately. She had stopped in front of a massive media screen plastered across the side of a hydration plant. It was a bounty notice. The image was a high-resolution scan of Kaleth's face, likely taken from the Dreadnought's intake files. But it had been altered. The propaganda machine had softened the sharp, dangerous angles of her jaw. They had widened her eyes to look less predatory and more doe-like. The text scrolling beneath her face described her not as a captain or a warrior, but as the rogue warbride of Sigma 9. The reward was staggering, 100 million credits. They made my lips fuller, Kaleth said, her voice flat, and they removed the scar on my brow. It is marketing, Rylan said, feeling a surge of nausea. They are selling a narrative. Fear sells, but desire sells better. If they make you look like a monster, people will run. If they make you look like this, people will hunt. They want to own me, she said, turning away from the screen. They want the galaxy to believe that a woman who fights back is just playing hard to get. She began walking again, faster this time. Rylan had to jog to keep up. We are going to the pawn district, she announced. We need IDs, Rylan hissed. Not jewelry. I need a memory sigil, she countered, dodging a hovering cargo drone. It is a Dominion archive device. My testimony alone will be dismissed as the ravings of a madwoman. I need the sigil to authenticate my words before the interstellar courts. There is a broker here who deals in war relics. Rylan checked his chrono. We have maybe 2 hours before someone recognizes you, even with that hood. Then walk faster, engineer. The pawn district was a maze of narrow alleyways lit by flickering purple floor tubes. Kaleth navigated the chaos with a mix of confusion and unearned confidence. She seemed baffled by the sheer density of human commerce, pausing to glare at inanimate objects that offended her sensibilities. At a vending kiosk, she stopped, staring at the row of synth coffees and energy drinks. She tapped the glass. And when the machine did not dispense a drink, she leaned in close and whispered something in her native tongue that sounded like a curse upon the machine's ancestors. It takes credits. Kaleth, Rylan explained, pulling her away as a queue of annoyed dock workers began to form. You cannot intimidate a vending machine. It hissed at me, she said defensively. In my culture, if you want a resource, you challenge the keeper. This box is hoarding hydration. It is a machine. It has no honor to challenge. She scoffed. You humans populate your world with slaves that have no souls, and then you act surprised when everything feels empty. A security drone hovered past them, a spherical unit with a glowing blue eye, scanning the crowd for weapon signatures. Kaleth stopped and bowed her head slightly, bringing her fist to her chest in a formal salute. What are you doing? Rylan whispered. Paying respect to the Tin Priest, she whispered back. It watches the flock. It must be a religious figure. It is a sanitation and surveillance bot, Rylan said, suppressing a hysterical laugh. It cleans up vomit and reports fights. Ah, she nodded sagely. A priest of low duties, noble. Despite the danger, Rylan found himself smiling. It was absurd. Here was one of the most dangerous combatants in the galaxy, a woman who could likely dismantle the drone with her bare hands, treating it with diplomatic courtesy. It was not just ignorance, it was a fundamental difference in how she viewed the world. To Kaleth, everything had a place, a purpose, and a spirit. To Rylan, everything was just parts waiting to break. They found the broker in a shop that smelled of old paper and copper dust. He was a withered man with cybernetic eyes that whirred as they focused on Caliph. He had the sigil, a small crystalline disc that hummed with resonance, but the price he quoted was exorbitant. Caliph placed her hand on the counter. The metal of the desk groaned under her grip. "We do not have credits," she said calmly, "but I offer you a life debt." The broker laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I cannot spend a life debt, girl. Credits or trade." Ryland stepped forward, placing a hand on Caliph's arm before she could escalate the negotiation to structural damage. He offered the broker the quantum cutter he had used to free her, a high-end, military-grade tool. The broker's mechanical eyes widened. The trade was made. As they exited the shop, Ryland looked at the sigil in Caliph's hand. "Is it worth it?" he asked. "My cutter was my livelihood." Caliph looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You were a salvage engineer, Ryland. You picked through the dead. This sigil will help us save the living. It is a fair trade." She pocketed the device, then looked at him with a sudden intensity. "You think I am just a soldier," she said, "a grunt with a rank." "I think you are good at fighting," Ryland admitted. "I am an orphan of the Ashwinter," she said. "I was adopted into the warrior caste because my genetic markers showed potential for high-G combat. But in the Dominion, adoption is political. My existence proves that bloodlines do not matter, only spirit. That makes me popular among the reformists who want to break the caste system. And it makes me very inconvenient for the traditionalists who want to keep it. So the massacre frame-up." Ryland started, the pieces falling into place. "It kills two birds with one stone," she said. "It starts a war that makes the helioform compact rich, and it destroys a political symbol that threatens the Dominion hierarchy. I am not just a casualty. Ryland, I am a precedent they need to erase." Before Ryland could respond, 3 men stepped out from the shadows of a cross corridor. They wore heavy kinetic mesh armor and carried stun batons and netcasters, bounty hunters. The leader, a massive man with a synthetic jaw, grinned. The poster was right. She is big. Caliph dropped into a combat stance instantly. The transition was terrifyingly fast. One moment she was standing relaxed. The next, she was a coiled spring of potential violence. Her cloak fell open, revealing the obsidian plates of her armor. "Stay back, Ryland," she warned, her voice dropping to a growl. The hunters spread out, blocking the exit. "We don't want the human," the leader said, "just the girl. 100 million alive, 50 million dead. We prefer alive, but we aren't picky." Caliph's eyes narrowed. Ryland saw her muscles tensing. She was calculating trajectories. She was going to kill them. She had promised not to. But in self-defense, that promise would evaporate. "Wait," Ryland shouted, stepping between Caliph and the hunters. "Move, engineer!" Caliph barked. Ryland held up his hands, not in surrender, but in a stop gesture. He looked at the hunters. "You are registered contractors with the Gallowglass Guild, right?" Ryland asked quickly. The leader blinked. "What?" "Yeah. So what?" "Then you are bound by Station Bylaw Section 4, Paragraph 2 regarding disputed asset claims in a neutral zone," Ryland said, his voice taking on the confident, boring cadence of a bureaucrat. The hunters paused. Caliph looked at Ryland as if he had lost his mind. "This asset," Ryland pointed to Caliph, "is currently under a provisional salvage lien filed by myself, Ryland Voss, time-stamped 4 hours ago upon entry. Under the Gallowglass Neutrality Pact, any attempt to seize a disputed asset without prior arbitration triggers an immediate guild suspension and a forfeiture of all bond fees." The leader lowered his baton slightly. "You are lying. Check the public ledger." Rylan bluffed. If you engage us now, the station AI will flag it as claim jumping. You will lose your license. You will be blacklisted from the trade board. Is the bounty worth never working in this sector again? The hunters exchanged glances. In Gallowglass, losing your license was a death sentence. It meant no air, no food, no protection. The leader tapped his earpiece, checking the database. The system was slow. Rylan held his breath. He knew there was no lien, but he also knew the station's bureaucracy was so clogged that a pending status could look like a confirmed file if you squinted. It says file pending, one of the other hunters muttered. Pending acts as a lock until arbitration, Rylan shouted, feigning outrage. You want to explain to the guildmaster why you violated a pending lock? The leader scowled, looking from Rylan to Calith, who was still ready to rip his throat out. This isn't over, the leader spat. We will wait for the arbitration to clear. Then we are coming for her. They backed away, disappearing into the crowd. Rylan let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. His knees felt like water. Calith relaxed her stance slowly. She stared at Rylan. You defeated them with words, she said, sounding genuinely baffled. I defeated them with paperwork, Rylan corrected, wiping sweat from his forehead. Or the threat of it. Calith threw her head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that made passers-by jump. It was not the bitter laugh from the dreadnought. This was genuine delight. You humans, she gasped. You are so strange. You build weapons that can crack planets, but you are more afraid of a form being filed incorrectly. You weaponize boredom. It is brilliant. Come on, Rylan said, grabbing her arm. They will figure it out in 10 minutes. We need to vanish. They found a hiding spot in a maintenance loft located above the station's reactor gardens. It was a cramped metal box filled with piping and the hum of the magnetic containment fields below. The air was hot and dry, vibrating with the energy of the star drive cores. There was no furniture, just a pile of thermal blankets and a floor of grating. They sat down, the space so small that their knees brushed. The adrenaline of the encounter was fading, leaving behind a heavy, exhausted silence. Calith leaned her head back against a bundle of conduits. She closed her eyes. Suddenly, her right hand spasmed, her fingers curled into a painful claw, and she gasped, her body jerking as if she had been shocked. Calith? Rylan asked, reaching out but stopping short of touching her. She hissed through her teeth, gripping her right wrist with her left hand. It is the aftershocks. The neural shackle. It rewires the nerves to expect pain. My body is waiting for the punishment command. It does not know the receiver is gone. Another spasm hit her, harder this time. She arched her back, a guttural sound of pain escaping her throat. She looked terrifyingly vulnerable, her warrior's composure cracking under the biological memory of torture. Can I help? Rylan asked. Ground me, she whispered. How? Pressure, confusion signals. Overwrite the ghost pain. Rylan hesitated. He knew what she needed, but he was terrified of crossing a line. She was a woman who had been bound and violated by technology. Unsolicited touch was the enemy. Tell me where, Rylan said softly. My wrists, she said, her voice tight. Hold them. Hard. Rylan moved closer. He took her wrists in his hands. Her skin was hot, feverish, under the obsidian plating of her forearms. He could feel the tendons jumping like live wires. He squeezed, applying steady, firm pressure. Calith groaned, leaning forward until her forehead rested on his shoulder. Her breathing was ragged. Is that okay? Rylan asked, his voice trembling. Yes, she breathed. Do not let go. They stayed like that for a long time. The heat of the reactor garden seeped up through the floor. Rylan could smell the scent of her, something like ozone and cinnamon. He could feel the weight of her against him. This was not the intimacy of lovers. Not yet. It was the intimacy of survival. Shared air, shared heat, shared fear. Slowly. The spasms began to subside. Kaleth's breathing leveled out. She did not pull away. She lifted her head, looking at him. Her face was inches from his. The golden eyes were wide, the pupils dilating in the dim light. The dynamic shifted. It changed from medical necessity to something else. Something charged and heavy. Kaleth looked at his hands, still gripping her wrists. "You are holding me," she said. "You asked me to," Rylan whispered. "I know," she said. "That is why it matters." She turned her hands over within his grip, interlacing her fingers with his. Her hands were large, rough with calluses, strong enough to crush bone, yet her touch was devastatingly gentle. "When I was in the cell," she said quietly, "I forgot what hands were for. I thought they were only for hurting or for being bound." She leaned in closer. Her gaze dropped to his lips, then back to his eyes. It was a question. Rylan felt his heart hammering. He was terrified, not of her strength, but of the responsibility of this moment. She was rewriting a trauma in real time. "What do you need?" Rylan asked. "I need to know that I can be touched without being owned," she said. She released one of his hands and brought it to her neck, placing his palm over the bruise where the collar had been. It was a gesture of supreme trust. She was giving him access to her most vulnerable point. Rylan's fingers brushed the damaged skin. He felt her pulse thrumming beneath his thumb. "Stop me if you want," Rylan said. "The word is stop." "I will not want to stop," she whispered. She closed the distance. Her lips met his. It was not a tentative first kiss. It was hungry. It was the taste of a person starving for connection, claiming it with the same intensity she used to fight. Kaleth kissed him like she was breathing him in. Rylan responded, his hesitation vanishing into the heat of her. He pulled her closer, his hands sliding from her neck to her back, feeling the strange, smooth texture of the fused armor plates and the softness of the skin between them. They shifted, the thermal blankets bunching beneath them. The encounter was heated, messy, and deeply emotional. Kaleth took the lead, her movements driven by a need to prove to herself that her body was hers again. She pinned him to the floor, her weight heavy and grounding, but she checked him constantly, a glance, a pause, ensuring he was with her. Rylan met her intensity with a surrender that was not weakness, but a choice to be the safe harbor she needed. It was power redefined. It wasn't about domination. It was about the terrifying thrill of being chosen by someone who could have destroyed you, but decided to love you instead. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the gloom, the hum of the reactors beneath them sounding like a lullaby. Kaleth rested her head on his chest, her arm thrown over his waist. "You humans," she mumbled sleepily. "You are so fragile. I was afraid I would break you." "I'm tougher than I look," Rylan said, stroking her hair. "No," she said. "You are soft, but it is a good soft. Like moss on a rock." Rylan laughed. "Did you just compare me to moss?" "It is a compliment," she yawned. "Moss survives everything. It grows where nothing else can." "I think humans need instruction manuals for your compliments," Rylan said. "And warriors need naps," she countered, her eyes already closing. They slept for an hour, a dreamless, restful blackness that they both desperately needed. They were woken by a ping on Rylan's datapad. It was a proximity alert he had set. "We have to move," Rylan said, sitting up and rubbing his face. They dressed in silence, the intimacy of the last hour settling into a comfortable, unspoken bond. They were no longer just conspirators. They were partners. They headed to the coordinates given by Rylan's old intelligence contact, a dive bar called the Event Horizon located near the station's structural spine. The contact was waiting. Dr. Sable Marrow did not look like a spy. She looked like a bartender who had seen too much. She was a small woman with sharp features and graying hair tied back in a severe bun. She was wiping a glass with a rag that looked suspiciously like the one Rylan used for oil changes. "You're late," Sable said without looking up. "We ran into traffic," Rylan said, sliding onto a stool, "and bounty hunters." Sable's eyes flicked to Kalith. She did not flinch. She studied the alien warrior with a cold, analytical gaze. "So this is the monster of Sigma-9, Sable said. "You look smaller in person, and you look like a librarian," Kalith replied coolly. "Appearances are deceptive," Sable smirked. "Touché." She reached under the bar and pulled out a data chip. "I have the intel you asked for, Rylan, but it's going to cost you." "We don't have money," Rylan said. "I don't want money. I want extraction. When you leave, I go with you." "Done," Rylan said immediately. Sable slid the chip across the counter. "The conspiracy has a name, the Helioform Compact. It's a coalition of 3 key senators, 2 major arms manufacturers, and a cult of security prophets who believe permanent war is the only way to keep humanity from stagnating." "And the massacre?" Kalith asked. "Staged," Sable said. "I dug into the subroutines of the border defense grid. The ships that attacked the colony weren't Dominion. They were proxy drones masked with falsified Dominion transponder echoes. The tech to fake those signatures is classified. Only Senate security has access to it." Kalith's hands curled into fists on the bar. "They murdered 3,000 people just to sell a narrative. They murdered 3,000 people to sell a quarterly earnings report," Sable corrected. "War is profitable. Peace is bad for business." "So what do we do?" Rylan asked. "We have the theory, but we don't have the proof." "You need the source," Sable said. The transponder echoes were beamed from a remote relay to hide the origin point. "But relays leave footprints. Where?" "A drifting anomaly buoy field in Sector 7, Sable said. "It's called the Choir." "The Choir?" Rylan paled. "That's a ghost zone. Old subspace signals get trapped there. It's a navigational nightmare. It's also where the logs are," Sable said. "The buoys in the Choir don't just transmit signals, they trap them. They remember everything that passes through. If the command signal for the drones went through that sector, the buoys recorded it." Kalith stood up. "Then we go to the Choir." "It's suicide," Rylan said. "It is necessary," Kalith said. Sable took off her apron and threw it on the bar. "Well, if we're going to die, I'd rather do it in space than in this dump. Let's go." As they walked back to the docking bay, the station seemed louder, brighter, and more hostile than before. The bounty hunters would be regrouping. The window was closing. They reached the airlock. Rylan paused to hack the door release. Kalith looked up at a massive holographic billboard above the bay. It was a new ad for the war effort. It showed a dramatic reenactment of the Sigma-9 massacre, with a CGI version of Kalith tearing through innocent colonists. The tagline flashed in red letters. "Contain the threat. Unleash the fleet." Kalith watched her digital self roar at the camera. She did not look angry anymore. She looked determined. She touched the spot on her wrist where Rylan had held her. "They fear me most when I'm unshackled," she whispered, a bitter humor curling the corner of her mouth. "Let's give them something real to fear," Rylan said. the door hissing open. Calith smiled, and this time, it was not the smile of a predator but of a leader. "Yes," she said. "Let's." The choir was not a place so much as a wound in the fabric of the sector. It was a dense field of shattered satellites, derelict hulls, and crystalline asteroid fragments that had drifted into the gravity well of a magnetar. The radiation from the dead star interacted with the exotic minerals in the debris, creating a phenomenon that defied standard physics. The field trapped electromagnetic echoes. Old transmissions, distress calls, and corrupted data streams did not dissipate here. They looped, they bled into the visual spectrum, creating ghostly auroras of static that danced between the rocks. Rylan Voss sat at the helm of the stolen courier ship, his knuckles white on the controls. The sensors were screaming, overwhelmed by a million years of noise. Navigating the choir was like trying to drive through a blizzard while shouting voices filled the cockpit. "It's getting louder," Sable Marrow said from the comm station, her hands flying over the frequency scrubbers. "I'm picking up mining reports from a century ago overlapping with a pop song that was popular last Tuesday." "It is not just noise," Calith said. She was standing behind Ryland's chair, staring out at the swirling clouds of violet dust. "It is memory." Ryland felt it too. The ship passed through a band of heavy ionization, and for a second, the cockpit vanished. Ryland was back in a sterile white room at Coalition Intelligence. He could smell the antiseptic. He could hear his supervisor telling him that the collateral damage was acceptable. He felt the crushing weight of his own silence, the moment he signed the paper that ruined a life to save a career. Guilt, sharp and fresh, stabbed him in the chest. Ryland gasped, shaking his head. The vision cleared, leaving him sweating and trembling. "Did you see that?" Ryland asked, his voice thick. "I heard the day I was taken," Calith whispered. Her eyes were unfocused. I heard the snap of the stun baton. I heard the handler laugh and say that I would look good in chains. "The field stores truth," Sable said, her face pale in the monitor's glow. "Raw, unedited truth. That's why the data logs we need are here. The choir doesn't let anything go. They push deeper. The target was a Class 4 relay buoy, a massive spinning cylinder of sensors that had been drifting in the field for weeks. It was the only object in the sector dense enough to have captured the massacre telemetry without corruption. Ryland spotted it on the scope. There it is. But we have a problem. The buoy was not alone. 3 gunships, painted in the matte black livery of a private corporate militia, were holding station around it. They were running salvage drones, cutting into the buoy's outer casing. "Corporate vultures," Ryland spat. "They're claiming salvage rights. We destroy them," Calith said simply. She reached for the weapons console. "Their shielding is standard civilian grade. I can disable their engines before they power up." "No," Ryland said, catching her wrist. "If we start a firefight here, the stray energy could ignite the ionization gas. We'll blow ourselves up along with the evidence." "Then how do we get the logs?" Calith demanded. "We ask nicely," Ryland said. "Or rather, we lie effectively." 20 minutes later, the courier ship was docked with the militia's command vessel. Ryland stood in the airlock, adjusting the collar of a generic technician's jumpsuit he had fabricated from the ship's stores. Beside him stood Calith, and she looked miserable. She was wearing oversized mechanic's coveralls that hung loosely on her frame, hiding the terrifying silhouette of her armor. She wore a heavy knit cap pulled low to cover her lack of hair and the distinct ridges of her skull. She looked like a very tall, very sulky cargo loader. "This fabric is offensive," Calith grumbled, picking at the sleeve. "It is soft. It feels like it is apologizing to my skin. It's called cotton." "Calith," Ryland hissed, "and stop standing like that." "Like what?" Like a statue of a conquering hero. Slouch, look tired. You're an underpaid technician on a double shift, not a warrior queen. Kalith attempted to slouch. It looked more like she was preparing to pounce on a small animal. Just don't talk. Rylan sighed. Carry the toolbox. Look grumpy. That shouldn't be hard. The airlock cycled. A militia captain, a man with a scarred face and a bored expression, was waiting for them. He was flanked by 2 guards who looked like they were paid by the hour. Manifest says you're here for a compliance patch, the captain asked, looking at Rylan's forged credentials on his data pad. Yeah, Rylan said, adopting a tone of weary annoyance. Sector Command says the buoy's firmware is drifting. If we don't patch it, the navigation beacon goes dark and you guys lose your salvage claim. I'm just here to upload the fix and leave. I don't want to be here any more than you do. The captain grunted. He looked at Kalith. Who's the giant? New hire, Rylan said quickly. Strong back, weak conversational skills. Doesn't speak much common. Kalith glared at the captain with a look that could have melted hull plating. Rylan nudged her ribs. She looked down at her boots, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a threat involving entrails. All right, the captain said. Make it quick. You have 10 minutes. It was working. They moved through the ship's umbilical to the buoy's maintenance hatch. Rylan jacked his data pad into the port. Sable, back on the courier ship, began the remote extraction. Data flow is slow. Sable's voice crackled in Rylan's earpiece. The files are huge. I need 2 minutes. Rylan leaned against the bulkhead, trying to look casual. Kalith stood by the door, vibrating with suppressed energy. She kept shifting her weight, her eyes darting to the guards' weapons. Relax, Rylan whispered. I am relaxed, Kalith replied through clenched teeth. I am merely calculating the 6 different ways I could disarm them using this toolbox. Don't. Suddenly, the captain's radio chirped. He listened, then frowned. He looked at Rylan. He tapped his data pad, scrolling through a new message. Hey, the captain said, his hand dropping to his sidearm. We just got a priority alert from Coalition Network. There's a fugitive salvage engineer matching your description. Rylan Voss. Rylan's stomach dropped. That was fast. Never heard of him, Rylan said, his smile tight. The captain raised his gun. Hands up. Both of you. Kalith moved. She did not draw a weapon. She swung the heavy metal toolbox with both hands. It connected with the captain's chest, sending him flying backward into his guards. The impact was like a thunderclap in the confined space. Go! Kalith roared. She grabbed Rylan by the back of his jumpsuit and threw him, literally threw him through the open hatch into the buoy's central shaft. Rylan tumbled through the zero-gravity interior, flailing until he grabbed a handhold. Kalith followed, launching herself into the shaft just as the guards opened fire. Laser bolts scorched the metal where she had been standing. The interior of the buoy was a disorienting tunnel of spinning sensor rings and floating debris. Without gravity, up and down were meaningless. We have to get to the extraction node manually, Rylan shouted, orienting himself. Sable can't finish the download if they cut the connection. They kicked off the walls, diving deeper into the machine. The militia were following. Rylan saw 3 figures in vac suits entering the shaft behind them. Kalith spun in midair, grabbing a floating strut to arrest her momentum. She looked at Rylan. Get the data. I will hold the door. No killing, Rylan reminded her, panic rising in his voice. Kalith smirked. I promise nothing permanent. She pushed off the strut, diving back toward the pursuers. Rylan turned and scrambled toward the data core. The fight that followed was a masterclass in zero-gravity combat. Kalith did not have a gun. She did not need one. She used the environment. As the first guard fired, She kicked off a rotating ring, spiraling around the shot. She grabbed the guard's ankle as she passed, using her momentum to fling him into the wall. He hit with a dull thud and went limp. The second guard tried to track her, but she was moving in 3 dimensions, bouncing off walls and pipes like a pinball. She ripped a conduit loose, sending a jet of steam into the shaft, blinding him. She emerged from the fog, grabbed his weapon, crushed the barrel with her bare hand, and then shoved him gently but firmly into a tangle of cargo netting. She was fighting with restraint. Every move was calculated to incapacitate, not destroy. She was keeping her word. Rylan reached the core. He plugged in directly. The download bar on his screen crept forward. 90%, 95, done. Caleth, I have it, Rylan shouted. Caleth kicked the last guard, a swift, precise blow to the solar plexus that left him wheezing, and pushed off toward Rylan. We leave, she commanded. They burst out of the buoy's emergency airlock, tethers snapping, and jetted across the void to their courier ship. The militia's guns were just starting to track them. They slammed into the airlock, gasping for air. Caleth hit the release, and Rylan scrambled for the cockpit. He punched the thrusters before the inner door was even sealed. The ship lurched away, dodging a spray of plasma fire, and vanished into the interference of the anomaly field. Safe in the silence of deep space, they gathered around the console to look at what they had stolen. Sable projected the data into the air. It was a chaotic mess of sensor logs, heat signatures, and communications intercepts. Here, Sable said, pointing to a waveform. This is the telemetry from the massacre. You can see the drone signatures. They match the Senate security profiles perfectly. But there is more, Caleth said, her eyes narrowing. What is that file? She pointed to a heavy, encrypted packet attached to the log. It was time-stamped 3 minutes after the attack began. Sable worked her decryption algorithms. It took 10 minutes. But when the file opened, the room went cold. It was an audio recording. A voice, cool and detached, authorized a cleanup and containment operation. But it wasn't just about destroying evidence. Target acquired, the voice said. Subject Caleth is secure. Initiate EV chain protocols. Deploy neural shackle suite. Begin behavioral narrative shaping. We do not need a martyr. We need a pet. EVA chain, Rylan whispered. What is that? Sable's face was grim. She pulled up a sub-file. It's a project dossier. Black budget. It's not just a restraint system for you. Caleth. It's a galaxy-wide initiative. They've been developing neural tech to target specific neurotypes, charismatic leaders, revolutionaries, anyone with the biological capacity to inspire loyalty. Rylan read the scrolling text. Primary objective: neutralize female command figures through induced passivity and pain compliance. Secondary objective: rebrand targets as emotionally unstable to delegitimize their political influence. Caleth stared at the screen. She did not rage. She went very still. They did not just want to stop me, she said softly. They wanted to rewrite me. They wanted to turn me into a warning for any other woman who dared to lead. It's industrial-scale gaslighting, Sable said, her voice shaking with anger. A proximity alarm blared, shattering the moment. Ship incoming, Rylan yelled. Fast mover. It's not militia. On the main screen, a sleek, dagger-shaped vessel dropped out of warp. It was silver and green, bristling with kinetic railguns. It is a Dominion interceptor, Caleth said. It is one of ours? They tracked us? Rylan asked. No, Caleth said. They are hunting me. They think I am a traitor. The comms crackled. Unidentified vessel. This is the Dominion ship Iron Talon. You are harboring a fugitive war criminal. Surrender her immediately or be destroyed. Rylan looked at Caleth. We run. We can lose them in the nebula. No, Kalith said. She stood up, pulling off the ridiculous knit cap and shaking out her sensory tendrils. And if I run, I confirm their lie. If I run, I am the coward they say I am. What are you doing? I am going over there, she said. I am going to face them, and you'll be killed, Rylan protested. Kalith looked at him. I am a captain of the Vare. I do not hide from my own people. She turned to the airlock. Rylan watched her go, his mind racing. He looked at Sable. Sable shrugged, checking the charge on a small pulse pistol. Don't look at me, Sable said. I'm the bartender. You're the hero. Rylan cursed under his breath. He grabbed his toolkit. He didn't have a weapon, but he had a laser cutter and a lot of stubbornness. He ran after Kalith. He caught her at the airlock just as she was suiting up. I'm coming with you, Rylan said. Kalith paused. Rylan, this is a Dominion military vessel. They eat soft humans like you for breakfast. I'm not soft, Rylan said, trembling slightly. I'm Moss. Remember? I survive everything. Kalith looked at him, and for a moment, her warrior mask slipped. She touched his cheek. You are a fool, she said tenderly. They boarded the Iron Talon together. The interior was stark, angular, and lit by harsh white lights. Soldiers lined the corridor, their armor humming with active shielding. They did not attack, but the hostility was thick enough to choke on. They were marched to the bridge. In the commander's chair sat Marshal Vorun. He was an elder warrior, his skin scarred and pale, his armor adorned with the medals of 100 campaigns. He had been Kalith's mentor. Vorun stood up as they entered. He looked at Kalith with a mixture of disappointment and pity. You look terrible. Kalith, Vorun said. I have had a bad week, she replied, her voice steady. Vorun looked at Rylan. And you brought a pet. How quaint. He is my partner, Kalith snapped. Vorun walked down from the dais. We have orders, Kalith. The Senate has provided evidence of your crimes, but I remember who you were. I can offer you a mercy. Mercy? Kalith asked. Return with us, Vorun said. Submit to purification. We will say you were under the influence of a neural virus. You will be cleared of the massacre. You will be reinstated. And the price? You will renounce your reformist views. Vorun said, you will serve as a symbol of traditional stability. You will be safe. You will be honored. You will be contained. Rylan saw Kalith's hands tremble. It was a tempting offer. Her life back, her honor restored. All she had to do was agree to be the statue they wanted her to be. Kalith looked at Vorun. Then she laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Safe, she repeated. Obedient, contained. You sound just like the humans. Vorun, I am trying to save you, Vorun roared. You are trying to silence me, Kalith yelled back, her voice filling the bridge. I invoke the right of truth. The soldiers in the room stiffened. The right of truth was an ancient Dominion law, a challenge that could not be refused. You challenge me? Vorun asked, his eyes narrowing. I challenge your information, Kalith said. I demand a hearing, here, now. Vorun hesitated. He looked at his crew. He could not refuse without losing face. Very well, Vorun said. Speak, but be warned. If your human speaks, I will have him spaced. Kalith stepped forward. She did not shout. She spoke with the calm authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. She told them about the ambush. She told them about the shackles. She told them about Eve Kane. It is a lie, Vorun said dismissively. A human conspiracy theory. Rylan stepped forward. I said silence, Vorun shouted, reaching for his sidearm. I'm terrified, Rylan blurted out. The bridge went silent. Vorun paused, confused. What? the marshal asked. I said I'm terrified, Ryland said, his voice shaking but loud. I'm a salvage engineer. I fix toilets and airlocks. I am standing on a warship surrounded by 7-foot super soldiers who could crush my skull like a grape. I am wetting my pants scared. He took a breath. But I am standing here, Ryland said, looking Vorun in the eye. I am standing here because she is telling the truth. And if you are half the warriors you claim to be, you'll look at the data before you pull the trigger. Courage isn't not being scared, Marshal. It's doing the right thing when you are... Vorun stared at Ryland. He looked at Kalith. He admits fear. Vorun murmured, that is unexpected. He has more honor in his fear than the Senate has in its bravery. Kalith said. She threw the data chip Ryland had given her onto the Marshal's console. Read it. Vorun plugged the chip in. He watched the logs. He listened to the Eve chain recording. His expression darkened. This voice, Vorun said, pointing to the audio file. I know this voice. It is the Senate liaison who has been funding our fleet upgrades. They are playing you, Marshal, Kalith said. They are using the Dominion as a blunt instrument. Vorun stood silent for a long time. Then he pulled the chip out and handed it back to Kalith. Go, Vorun said. Sir, a lieutenant asked. I said go, Vorun barked. If this is true, then we are not allies of the Senate. We are pawns, and the Vair are no one's pawns. He looked at Kalith. I cannot protect you. Kalith, the warrant is still active, but I will not hunt you today. Thank you. Marshal, Kalith said, bowing her head. As they turned to leave, Vorun called out, Human. Ryland turned. You have a spine. Vorun grunted. Keep it. They returned to the courier ship in silence. As soon as the airlock cycled, the tension broke. Kalith leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the deck plates. She looked exhausted. Ryland sat beside her. You were amazing back there. I was terrified too, she admitted. They sat in the quiet of the ship, the stars streaking by outside. Ryland, Kalith said softly, do you know what I meant when I said I would show you a real woman? I assumed it was a warrior thing, Ryland said. She shook her head. The Senate, the Dominion, they all have definitions. A real woman is soft. A real woman is strong. A real woman is a mother. A real woman is a soldier. They build these boxes and demand we fit inside. She looked at her hands, the obsidian plates gleaming in the low light. But a real woman is just a person who decides for herself, she said. Even if she decides wrong, even if she is messy, even if the world calls her dangerous, it is the audacity to define your own shape. She looked at Ryland, her golden eyes searching his face. What do you want, Ryland? If we survive this, if you stop being a tool for other people, what do you want? Ryland thought about it. He thought about his empty apartment on the station. He thought about the salvage contracts. I want a life that doesn't require betraying myself, Ryland said slowly. I want to wake up and not hate the person in the mirror. He looked at her. And I want to be near you, not to save you, just to be there. Kalith smiled. It was a soft, private smile. Then we are partners, she said, in truth. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was slow, deep, and filled with a quiet promise. It was not a desperate grasp for life in the face of death. It was a vow made in the calm center of the storm. We choose each other, she whispered against his lips. The moment was broken by Sable's voice from the cockpit. I hate to interrupt the romance novel, Sable called out, but we have a massive problem. They went to the cockpit. Sable pointed at the long-range scanners. Someone leaked our trajectory, Sable said. The helioform compact knows we're coming, and they aren't sending a fleet to kill us. What are they doing? Rylan asked. They're inviting us, Sable said. Look at the Capitol news feeds. On the screen, a news anchor was speaking. Reports confirm that the rogue warbride Kalith is en route to Aster Vane to surrender. The Senate has prepared a special public tribunal to hear her plea. It's a trap, Rylan said. It's a show, Kalith corrected. They want to put me on trial. They want to break me on live broadcast so the whole galaxy can see that the monster has been tamed. They want a performance, Kalith said, her voice turning cold. She looked at Rylan. Let's give them one they will never forget. The warning lights on the courier ship's console were not flashing red. They were pulsing a sickly, necrotic green. Rylan Voss stared at the diagnostic screen, watching as the hull integrity numbers dropped by 1% every 3 minutes. It was not a missile strike or a laser burn. It was something far more insidious. We have a parasite, Rylan said, his voice tight. It is a nanoplague, Sable Marrow confirmed from the engineering station. She was typing furiously, her face bathed in the green glow of the distress signal. Helioform must have tagged us during the escape from the choir. It is eating the hull plating, converting the metal into a transmission antenna. It is broadcasting our location to every hunter in the sector. Can we scrape it off? Kalith asked. She was pacing the small bridge, her movements agitated. If we go outside, it will eat our suits, Rylan said. If we try to burn it off with atmospheric entry, it will burrow deeper and breach the core. We are flying a beacon that is slowly dissolving us. There is one place, Sable said, pulling up a star chart. It is a gamble, but they have the facilities to purge active nanotech. She pointed to a coordinate deep in the gravity well of a dead star. The glass reliquary. Rylan read the label. That is an outlaw zone. It is a myth. It is a pre-coalition megastructure. Sable corrected. It is a sanctuary for things the galaxy wants to forget. The radiation from the dead star messes with standard sensors. And the reliquary itself. Well, the architecture is unique. It has an automated quarantine field that can strip the plague. Set the course, Kalith ordered. Rylan looked at her. It is dangerous. Kalith, the stories say people go in there and lose their minds. We are already losing our ship, she said. I prefer madness to disintegration. They dropped out of warp 2 hours later in the shadow of a black dwarf, a star that had burned out billions of years ago, leaving only a cold, dense gravitational ghost. Orbiting it was the reliquary. It did not look like a station. It looked like a shattered cathedral made of diamond and frozen light. Spires of crystalline material twisted into impossible geometries, catching the faint starlight and refracting it into rainbows that should not have existed in the vacuum. Rylan guided the ship toward a docking spire. The sensors were useless here, the readings were gibberish, showing temperature fluctuations that matched the rhythm of a human heartbeat. We are docking manually, Rylan said, wrestling with the stick. The autopilot thinks the station is singing to it. They slammed into the docking clamp with a metallic groan. The airlock cycled, and the decontamination mist hissed. Masks on, Rylan warned. We don't know what the air is like in there. They stepped into the reliquary. The interior was breathtaking and unsettling. The walls were not metal. They were semi-translucent crystal, pulsing with a faint rhythmic light. The floor felt warm, almost organic, beneath their boots. As Kalith brushed her hand against the wall, the crystal flared. A sound filled the corridor, the sound of a child laughing. What was that? Rylan asked, spinning around with his laser cutter raised. It is a memory, Sable whispered. staring at the walls. This material, it is psychoreactive. It absorbs the neural patterns of anyone who touches it. It replays them. Kalith pulled her hand back as if burned. Great, she muttered. A building that remembers, just what we need. A haunted house in space. They moved deeper, heading toward the central core where Sable claimed the purge systems were located. The station was not empty. It was populated by the drift of the galaxy, exiles, madmen, and scholars who had fled the noise of civilization. They came to a massive circular door with no handle and no keypad. It shimmered with a violet hue. Rylan tried to pry it open, but it held fast. It is locked. Rylan grunted, straining against the crystal. It is not locked, a voice said from the shadows, when it is waiting. They turned. Standing in an alcove was a group of humans wearing robes made of heavy, gray acoustic foam. They looked like monks, but their eyes were dull, medicated, and vacant. Who are you? Kalith demanded, stepping in front of Rylan. We are the Order of the Static Line, the leader said. He was an older man, his face familiar to Rylan from old history vids, an ex-senator who had vanished decades ago. We worship the stability, the pause between breaths. Open the door, Kalith said. The leader shook his head. The door responds to state of mind. It opens only for those who are perfectly still. Fear closes it. Anger locks it. You vibrate with chaos. Child. Kalith looked at the door. She looked at the cultists. You worship boredom, she said flatly. We worship control, the leader corrected. Emotion is a variable. Variables lead to war. We have removed the variable. Kalith snorted. You have removed the life. You dress like unmade beds and speak like damp instructions. You think paralysis is peace. It is not. It is just rotting slowly. The leader's face twitched. Insolence is a vibration. Kalith turned to the door. She closed her eyes. She did not try to be calm. She did not try to be empty. She focused on her intent. She focused on the absolute, unshakable truth of why she was there. I am not calm, she whispered to the crystal. I am a storm, but I am a directed storm. The door did not just open, it shattered. The crystal shards dissolved into mist, clearing the path. Kalith stepped through, glancing back at the stunned cultists. You should try feeling something, she said. It opens more doors. They ran through the opening before the cultists could rally. The corridor beyond was narrower, the crystals jagged and sharp. The air grew colder. We are getting close to the core, Sable said, checking her data pad. But the psychoreactive field is stronger here. Don't touch anything. Rylan tried to keep his arms tucked in, but the floor was uneven. He stumbled, his shoulder brushing a large, jagged spike of quartz. Immediately, his vision blurred. He was back in the apartment on the fringe the day his wife left him. He felt the crushing weight of failure, the silence of the room, the smell of stale coffee. He gasped, shaking his head to clear the vision. Don't look at it, Sable yelled. Focus on your feet. Kalith was walking ahead. She was moving stiffly. The corridor here was narrow, forcing them to squeeze past glowing pillars. Her armor scraped against a cluster of blue crystals. Kalith froze. Her eyes went wide, the gold iris swallowed by the dilation of her pupils. She stopped breathing. Her hands flew to her throat, clawing at invisible metal. Kalith? Rylan called out. She did not answer. She was not there. She was back in the holding cell on the dreadnought. The crystal was feeding her own trauma back to her in a high-fidelity loop. She was feeling the collar tighten. She was feeling the electric fire in her nerves. She dropped to her knees, her body convulsing in a phantom seizure. Rylan rushed to her. He reached out to grab her shoulders, to shake her out of it. Stop, Sable warned. If you grab her while she is in a flashback, she will break your neck. She doesn't know where she is. Rylan froze. Kalith was hyperventilating, her sound sharp and terrified. Unshackle. She gasped. Unshackle. Rylan knelt in front of her, keeping his hands visible. He lowered his voice, making it steady and low, cutting through the panic. Kalith. It is Rylan. You are in the reliquary. The collar is gone. She did not hear him. She flinched as if struck. Rylan took a breath. He knew he had to ground her, but he could not force it. That was the whole point. Kalith, he said, louder this time. I am going to touch your hand. Just your hand. Is that okay? He waited. She whimpered, her eyes darting frantically. I am offering a hand. Kalith, you have to take it. You have to choose it. Slowly. Painfully. Kalith's hand uncurled from her throat. She reached out, blindly groping the air. Rylan met her hand. He did not grab. He offered a solid surface. She gripped him, her strength terrifying, crushing his fingers. I am here, Rylan said. Squeeze. Feel the bone. Feel the ring on my finger. It is real. The pain is a memory. This is real. Kalith gasped, a massive intake of air. She blinked, the golden light returning to her eyes as the hallucination shattered. She looked at Rylan, then at their joined hands. Rylan, she whispered. You're back, he said, not letting go until she loosened her grip. The walls. She shuddered. They scream. We're almost there, Rylan said, helping her stand. Just keep your eyes on me. Ignore the walls. Watch my back. They reached the purge chamber 10 minutes later. It was a massive industrial airlock lined with heavy lead shielding that blocked the crystal's effects. Rylan initiated the sequence. The ship, docked remotely, was bathed in a harsh cleansing radiation that boiled the nanoplague off the hull. Sable stood by the console, monitoring the process. Rylan noticed she was tapping a sequence into her comms unit, a sequence that had nothing to do with the purge. Who are you messaging? Rylan asked, his voice sharp. Sable jumped. No one. Just running diagnostics. Rylan grabbed her wrist. He saw the encryption key. It was a direct line to the core worlds. You are broadcasting our survival, Rylan accused. You are telling them we are here. Sable yanked her hand back. It is a failsafe. We can't take down Helioform alone. We need allies. I contacted a source I trust. Who? Kalith demanded, stepping forward. I can't tell you yet, Sable said, her voice trembling. If you know, you'll act differently. You have to trust me. Trust is earned. Sable, Kalith growled. Secrets are for enemies. Before Sable could answer, the station rocked violently. An explosion echoed from the docking spire. They found us, Rylan said, checking the monitors. It wasn't a ship bombardment. It was a boarding party. Helioform mercenaries, clad in white tactical armor, were swarming the corridor they had just left. Rylan checked the weapon signatures on the screen. They aren't using plasma. They're using sticky foam and neural stunners. They want me alive, Kalith realized. They want their trial. We have to get to the ship, Rylan said. The purge is done. They sprinted out of the chamber, back into the crystalline maze. The mercenaries blocked the path. There were 12 of them, heavily armored and professional. Target acquired, the lead mercenary announced, his voice amplified. Kalith of Vare, submit for compliance processing. We are authorized to use non-lethal force. Kalith did not slow down. She accelerated. Rylan raised his laser cutter, but Kalith shouted, "No killing. Rylan, we do not give them the footage they want." She hit the mercenary line like a wrecking ball, but it was a precise wrecking ball. She ducked under a stun baton swing, grabbed the mercenary's arm, and used his own momentum to flip him into the wall. She tore the power pack off another man's rifle before he could fire, then kicked his legs out from under him. She was a blur of motion. She disarmed, she disabled, she stunned. She caught a stun grenade in midair and threw it back before it detonated. She was showing them exactly what she was. A warrior of superior skill who was choosing mercy. It was more humiliating than if she had killed them. Rylan provided cover, using his cutter to slice through overhead conduits, dropping heavy cables to block the reinforcements. They reached a junction in the reliquary where the architecture became unstable. The floor shifted like a sliding puzzle. "Split up!" Kaleth yelled as a wall of crystal slammed down between them, separating her from Rylan and Sable. "Meet at the airlock!" Rylan and Sable ran down the left corridor. Kaleth took the right. As Rylan ran, the corridor changed. The crystals smoothed out, forming a mirror-like surface. The sounds of battle faded. He was running down a hallway that looked exactly like the Coalition Intelligence headquarters. A door opened. A man stepped out, his old director. "Rylan," the director said, smiling warmly. "Stop running. It's a trick," Rylan told himself. "It's the station reading my mind." "We wiped your file," Rylan, the director said, holding out a data pad. "Look, no treason charge, no debt. We even restored your pension. You can walk away, just leave the alien. She is a variable. You like stability, you can go home." Rylan stopped. He looked at the data pad. It offered everything he had lost 5 years ago. Safety, respect, a quiet life. "It is just a shackle made of paper," Rylan said. He looked at the vision of the director. "I don't want a clean slate," Rylan said. "I want a real one." He raised his laser cutter and slashed the crystal wall. The vision shattered into jagged shards of light. He stepped through the debris, back into the cold reality of the reliquary. On the other side of the junction, Kaleth faced her own trial. The corridor dissolved into a throne room. It was the grand hall of the Vare Dominion, but greater, grander. Thousands of warriors chanted her name. Marshal Vorun knelt before her, holding a crown made of starlight. "Unite us," Vorun said. "The Senate offers you the Dominion. You will not be a prisoner. You will be a queen. You can bring order. You can stop the chaos. Just accept their narrative. Be the icon they need." Kaleth looked at the crown. It was beautiful. It was power. It was the ability to change everything, provided she agreed to be a lie. "I am not a symbol," Kaleth said, her voice echoing in the illusion. "I am not a queen. I am a person." She took the crown from Vorun's hands. "And I do not serve masters who build cages and call them palaces." She crushed the crown in her hands. The throne room evaporated, leaving her standing in a dark service tunnel, panting. She ran. They reunited at the airlock. Rylan was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Kaleth's armor was scorched. Sable looked terrified. "Did the hallway try to bribe you too?" Rylan panted, leaning against the hull of their ship. "It offered me a kingdom," Kaleth said, checking Rylan's wound. "I declined. It was too drafty." Rylan laughed. It was a hysterical, breathless sound. "We are being psychoanalyzed by a building while being shot at. This is the worst therapy session I have ever had." The mercenaries were regrouping at the end of the hall. "Get in the ship," Rylan yelled. They scrambled aboard. Kaleth hit the thrusters, tearing the docking clamp loose. They shot out of the reliquary, leaving the crystalline structure and the confused mercenaries behind. As they hit the safety of deep space, the adrenaline crash hit them. Sable sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the comms panel. "I have to tell you," she said quietly. Rylan and Kalith turned to her. The failsafe, Sable said. The person I contacted. It is Senator Isolde Kane. Isolde Kane? Rylan asked. The reformist? The one who gives speeches about interspecies unity? She is the only one with the political weight to protect us, Sable said. She agreed to arrange a legal channel for the evidence. She is clearing a path for us to land at the Capitol. She calls it asylum. Rylan looked at Kalith. If we have a senator on our side, maybe we have a chance. Kalith was staring at the screen, her expression dark. Isolde Kane, Kalith murmured. I have studied her. She speaks of compassion, but she votes for increased security budgets. She calls for unity, but her family owns stock in the restraint manufacturers. Kalith looked at Sable. You did not find an ally. Sable. You found the spider. What? Sable asked, pale. She is the public face of the Helioform Compact, Kalith said with certainty. The hardliners create the fear. She offers the solution. The solution is control. She is not offering asylum. She is guiding us into a trap. Sable buried her face in her hands. I didn't know. I swear. I thought. It makes sense, Rylan said, realizing the horror of it. They want a public trial. Who better to preside over it than the compassionate senator who tamed the savage alien? It's a scripted drama, and we just walked onto the stage. So we run? Sable asked, looking up. No, Kalith said. She stood up, walking to the viewport to stare at the distant stars of the core worlds. If we run, they win. If we hide, they win. They have the cameras. They have the script. She turned back to them. We go to Aster Vane. We accept the asylum. We walk into the trap. Are you insane? Rylan asked. They expect a monster, Kalith said. Or they expect a broken pet. They do not expect a woman who knows the lines they have written for her and refuses to speak them. She looked at Rylan. We will turn their courtroom into a battlefield, but not with guns, with the truth. Rylan looked at her. She was terrified. He could see the tremor in her hands, but she was standing tall. Are you ready? She asked him. Ready for what? To be hated, she said. If we do this, half the galaxy will hate you for helping me. The other half will hate you for not killing me. There is no reward at the end of this. Rylan, just the truth. Rylan stood up. He walked over to her and took her hand. If I am unshackled, Rylan said, echoing the words she had said to him in the dark. I can live with hate. Kalith squeezed his hand. Then let us go, she said. The show must go on. Aster Vane was not a city. It was a performance engine built of glass and light. The capital of the coalition sprawled across the equatorial belt of the planet, a megastructure where politics was theater, and the attention of the citizenry was the only currency that mattered. Towers of spiraling photon glass pierced the clouds, broadcasting news feeds, advertisements, and Senate decrees directly into the retinas of the billion souls living in the shadow of the spires. Rylan Voss piloted the courier ship toward the private landing pad of the Senate spire. The descent felt less like a landing and more like a surrender. The sky around them was clogged with media drones, buzzing like angry wasps, filming every second of the approach. They were not fugitives anymore. They were content. Sable Marrow sat in the co-pilot seat, her face pale. She was checking the encryption on the data packet they had stolen from the choir. They are already spinning it, Sable said, watching the local feeds. The headlines say Kalith is coming to beg for forgiveness. They are calling it the taming of the beast. Kalith stood behind them. She was wearing her armor, battered and scorched from the reliquary. but she had polished the obsidian plates until they shone like mirrors. She did not look tamed. She looked like a warhead waiting for a detonator. "Let them spin," Kaleth said. "Centrifugal force eventually throws everything apart." The ship touched down. The airlock cycled, waiting for them on the platform, bathed in the soft, flattering light of the golden hour. Was Senator Isolde Kine. She was a vision of benevolence, dressed in flowing robes of unbleached silk that suggested humility and high cost in equal measure. She was flanked by armed guards, but they stood back, giving the illusion that she was greeting friends. Kaleth stepped out first. The cameras flashed, a strobe light storm of white. Senator Isolde stepped forward, her arms open, a smile on her face that was perfectly calibrated to convey warmth without weakness. "Kaleth," Isolde said, her voice amplified by hidden microphones. "Welcome to Sanctuary. We are so glad you chose peace." Kaleth stopped. She looked at the senator. Rylan watched Kaleth's face. He saw the micro-expression, the tightening of the jaw, the predator recognizing a fellow hunter. Kaleth knew exactly what Isolde was, a shark in a cardigan. Kaleth bowed, a stiff, formal motion. "I chose truth." "Senator," Kaleth said, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "Peace is merely the byproduct." Isolde's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. She gestured to the tower. "Come. We have prepared quarters for you. You must be exhausted. We will discuss the formalities of your situation tomorrow." The quarters were a penthouse suite that occupied the entire 45th floor of the asylum wing. It was luxurious, filled with soft furniture, real plants, and a view of the city that cost more than Ryland's entire life earnings. It was also a cell. The windows were reinforced hyperglass. The doors were magnetic locked. The air vents hummed with chemical sniffers. Ryland immediately went to work. He pulled a panel off the wall entertainment system and jacked his datapad into the building's fiber optic trunk. "They are watching everything," Ryland murmured. "Let them watch," Kaleth said. She was standing by the window, looking out at the glittering city. She picked up a vase of flowers, studied it, and then set it down with a heavy thud. "What are you doing?" Sable asked Ryland. "I am sharding the massacre logs," Ryland explained, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. "I am using a salvage encryption protocol. It breaks the file into 1,000,000 tiny pieces and hides them in the background traffic of the city's commercial grid. If I tried to upload it all at once, their firewalls would catch it. This way, the data is everywhere, in the toaster regulators, the traffic lights, the billboard updates. It is dormant, waiting for a trigger key. Smart," Sable said. "You are turning the city into a hard drive." Kaleth turned away from the window. She watched Isolde on the news feed. The senator was giving an interview about the importance of empathy in dealing with primitive cultures. "She wears softness like armor," Kaleth observed. "Look at her clothes. No buttons, no zippers, just flowing fabric. It says, 'I am harmless.' It says, 'I have nothing to hide.'" "It is fashion politics," Sable said. "It is designed to make her look maternal. It is designed to hide her teeth," Kaleth corrected. "In the Dominion, we wear our capacity for violence on our skin. Our armor is honest. This is a lie stitched in silk." Ryland looked up from his work. He cracked a smile. "I miss the bounty hunters," he said. "Why?" Kaleth asked. "They just wanted to punch us," Ryland said. "I miss people who just punch you honestly. This place, it feels like being digested by a very polite snake." The next morning, the politeness ended. The helioform legal team arrived at dawn. They were a phalanx of lawyers and brand managers who spoke in rapid-fire legalese. They informed Caliph that the tribunal would be held that afternoon. It would be broadcast live to 200 systems. For transparency, the lead lawyer said. A man with teeth that were too white. The galaxy needs to see justice done. They brought a case. Inside was the new restraint device. They called it the Halo Cuff. It was not a heavy iron collar like the one on the Dreadnought. It was a slender, elegant band of white composite that looked like a piece of high-end jewelry. This is a humane security measure, the lawyer explained, holding it up for the camera crew that had just barged in. It monitors adrenaline levels. It ensures safety for everyone, including the defendant. Caliph looked at the device. Her face did not twitch. Her rage had gone past heat. It was ice now. Put it on, Caliph said softly. The lawyer blinked. Excuse me, put it on me. She said, if it is for my safety, then let us be safe. She held out her wrist. The lawyer clicked the device into place. It hummed with a soft blue light. Caliph stared at it. She knew what it really was. It was a quieter leash, a prettier way to stop her heart. The tribunal was held in the grand amphitheater of Astor Vane. It was a massive arena, seats filled with thousands of spectators, the air buzzing with drones. In the center was a raised platform where Isolde Kine sat on a high chair, acting as the moderator. Caliph was brought out. She walked to the center of the stage. She did not hang her head. She did not look at the floor. She looked directly into the camera lenses. Isolde began the proceedings with a speech about tragedy and the need for accountability. She painted Caliph not as a villain, but as a broken thing, a victim of her own violent culture who needed the benevolent guidance of the coalition to be fixed. Caliph, Isolde said, her voice dripping with concern, do you feel remorse for the lives lost at Sigma 9? Caliph leaned into the microphone. I feel rage, Caliph said. The crowd murmured. Isolde frowned slightly. Rage is a symptom of trauma, Isolde said smoothly. We can help you process that. I do not need help processing truth, Caliph said. I did not kill those people. You know this. The data exists. Isolde sighed, looking at the audience with a pitying expression. Denial is the first stage of grief. Perhaps a demonstration is in order. We have prepared a simulation. We want to show the galaxy the intensity of your training, to understand why you snapped. The floor of the amphitheater shifted. Barriers rose. The lawyer stepped forward. We have arranged a ceremonial combat. You will face drones programmed to mimic the Dominion terrorists you claim framed you. Show us how you defend yourself. Show us your nature. It was a trap. If she fought, she looked like a killer. If she refused to fight, she looked like a coward or worse, admitted guilt. They wanted footage of her being violent to loop on the news forever. Caliph looked at the drones rising from the pit. They were painted in Dominion red and black, but they moved with the eerie, synchronized silence of coalition tech. I have a condition, Caliph said. Isolde paused. You are in no position to make demands. I am the star of your show, Caliph said. Without me, this is just a boring meeting. If I win, if I defeat your test, I get 60 seconds. 60 seconds of what? Isolde asked. Uncensored speech, Caliph said. No interruptions, no commentary, just me and the microphone. The legal team huddled. They whispered to Isolde. They were confident. The drones were military grade. Even if she won, 60 seconds of ranting would just make her look more unstable. It played into their narrative perfectly. Agreed, Isolde said, smiling. 60 seconds. They were given an hour recess to prepare the arena. Kaleth was taken to a holding cell beneath the stage. Rylan and Sable were allowed to join her, under guard. The guards stayed outside the door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and fear. "They are going to kill you out there," Rylan said, pacing the small room. "Those aren't training drones. I saw the specs. They are hunter-killers." "I know," Kaleth said. She was sitting on a bench, adjusting the straps of her armor. "Then why agree?" Rylan asked. "Because I need the microphone," she said. "And I need you to be ready." She looked at Sable. "Is the trigger ready?" Sable nodded, holding up a small remote detonator she had rigged to Rylan's data pad. "As soon as you give the signal, I drop the encryption key. The massacre logs will hit every screen in the city." Kaleth turned to Rylan. He was shaking. He looked like he was about to vomit. "Rylan," she said. He looked at her. "Come here," she said. He walked over. She stood up. She towered over him, but she did not make him feel small. She made him feel protected. She reached out and took his face in her hands. Her thumbs traced the line of his jaw. "You are afraid," she stated. "I am terrified," Rylan admitted. "I don't want to lose you. Not now. Not when we just started." Kaleth leaned her forehead against his. "You will not lose me," she whispered. "But I need you to be steady. I need to know that when I step out there, I am not alone." "I am with you," Rylan said. "Always." She kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce. It was a collision of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, choosing to jump together. It was a claiming. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. Kaleth looked at him, her golden eyes burning. "Do you want this?" she asked. "Not the mission, not the survival. Me? Do you want me?" Rylan looked at her. He saw the scars on her skin. He saw the alien geometry of her face. He saw the woman who had ripped a door off its hinges to save him. "I choose you," Rylan said. "I choose all of it." Kaleth smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Then watch me," she said. "And when I give the word, unshackle the truth." The hour ended. The arena lights blazed. Kaleth stepped onto the sand. The halo cuff on her wrist pulsed. 3 drones hovered in the air. They were sleek, armed with plasma cutters and kinetic rams. "Begin!" the announcer's voice boomed. The first drone dove. Kaleth did not dodge. She stepped into the attack. She took the impact on her shoulder plate, the obsidian cracking but holding. She grabbed the drone's chassis with both hands. She did not just destroy it. She dissected it. With a roar of effort, she ripped the outer casing off the drone. She exposed the internal circuitry. She held it up to the cameras. "Look!" she shouted, dodging a plasma bolt from the second drone. "Look at the core." She threw the wrecked drone at the glass wall of the VIP box where Isolde sat. It smashed against the barrier, the exposed parts glittering. The second drone fired. Kaleth rolled, scooping up a piece of the wreckage, a sharp strut of alloy. She threw it like a javelin. It pierced the second drone's intake fan. The drone spun out of control, crashing into the sand. She jumped onto the third drone. She wrestled it to the ground, her weight pinning it. She ripped out its logic board and she stood up, holding the smoking component. She was bleeding from a cut on her cheek. Her armor was scored, but she was standing. The crowd was silent. They had expected a beast. They were watching a surgeon. "I have won!" Kaleth roared at Isolde. "Give me my time." Isolde looked pale. The demonstration had not gone as planned. Kaleth hadn't looked like a monster. She had looked like a hero fighting machines. But a deal was a deal, and breaking it on live TV would be worse. Isolde nodded. The microphone in the center of the arena activated. A countdown clock appeared on the giant screens. 60 seconds. Kaleth walked to the microphone. She wiped the blood from her face. She looked at the camera. She did not shout. She spoke with a terrifying intimacy, as if she were speaking to every single person in the city individually. They told you I was a monster, Kalith began. They told you I was a savage who needed to be tamed. They told you that to be safe, you must be controlled. She raised her wrist, showing the white halo cuff. They call this humane, she said. They call it safety. But look at what it does. It stops me from moving. It stops me from speaking. It stops me from being. The timer ticked down. 40 seconds. They have a phrase here. Kalith continued. A real woman. They say a real woman is soft. A real woman is quiet. A real woman is grateful for her cage. She leaned in close. I am telling you that is a lie. A real woman is not a weapon you can sheath. A real woman is not a problem you can solve. A real woman is a person who decides for herself. 20 seconds. Rylan, watching from the wings, nodded to Sable. Now, he whispered. Sable hit the detonator. Kalith looked up at Isolde. Unshackle me, Kalith said, or I will break the world. 0 seconds. The broadcast did not cut to commercial. It cut to black. And then, it exploded into color. Rylan's virus hit the network. Every screen in Astor Vane, every billboard, every datapad, every traffic hologram flickered and changed. The massacre logs appeared, the sensor data from the choir, the audio recording of the Senate security order, target acquired, initiate EVA chain protocol. We do not need a martyr. We need a pet. The voice echoed across the city. It boomed from the stadium speakers. It was undeniable. It was the voice of Isolde's chief of staff. The crowd in the stadium looked at the screens. Then they looked at Isolde. The silence broke. It didn't break with a cheer. It broke with a roar of outrage. Chaos erupted. In the stands, people began to shout. Security guards looked at each other, confused. The narrative had shattered. The Eve chain documents were scrolling on the Jumbotron, showing the payment transfers from Isolde's personal accounts to the restraint manufacturers. Isolde Kane stood up, her mask of benevolence slipping. She looked frantic. She tapped her earpiece, screaming for a cut to the feed. But the feed was everywhere. Security! Isolde shrieked. Arrest her! Arrest them all! The helioform mercenaries moved toward the arena floor, but the crowd moved first. Citizens, realizing they had been played, threw debris onto the field. Some blocked the aisles. Rylan and Sable ran onto the arena floor. Rylan grabbed Kalith's arm. We did it! Rylan yelled over the noise. The city is waking up. Kalith looked at the chaos. She looked at Isolde, who was trying to flee toward a private exit. Not yet, Kalith said. Sable saw Isolde running. The bartender turned spy didn't hesitate. She grabbed a discarded drone strut and ran to intercept. Sable blocked the VIP exit. Isolde stopped, her eyes wide with panic. Get out of my way, Isolde screamed. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Sable said, standing her ground. You are the architect, and the building is falling down. Security forces arrived, surrounding Sable and Isolde, but the cameras were still rolling. The image of the senator trying to flee while the terrorist stood her ground was being beamed to 3 sectors. On the arena floor, Kalith did one last thing. She raised her left hand. She gripped the white halo cuff with her right hand. The device was made of hardened composite, designed to withstand hydraulic cutters. Kalith closed her eyes. She summoned every ounce of strength she possessed, not just muscle, but the hysterical strength of a woman who refused to be owned ever again. She roared. It was a primal sound, a sound that shook the glass walls. The composite groaned. Hairline fractures appeared in the white plastic. The crowd went silent. watching. With a final sickening crack, the cuff shattered. Pieces of white plastic fell into the sand. Kalith held up her bruised, bare wrist. She looked at the camera. She looked at the world. She did not say a word. She didn't have to. The image was the message. Rylan stood beside her, his hand finding hers. She gripped him tight. The revolution had begun, and it started with the sound of plastic breaking. Astor Vane was screaming. The riots that had begun in the stadium had spilled into the streets. A tidal wave of noise and neon that crashed against the pristine glass of the capital's lower districts. The revelation of the Eve chain protocols had shattered the carefully curated reality of the coalition. And now the citizens were tearing up the pavement to throw at the sky. Rylan Voss piloted the courier ship low over the burning city, weaving between the spires. Beside him, Kalith watched the sensors. Her face was set in a grim mask, the adrenaline of the arena fading into the cold focus of a soldier behind enemy lines. "They are not surrendering," Kalith said, pointing to the energy spikes on the dashboard. "The Senate Guard is mobilizing, but they are not targeting the rioters. They are targeting the infrastructure. They are locking down the grid," Sable Marrow said from the rear console. She was nursing a bruised arm, her face illuminated by the scrolling code of the city's network. "But it is worse than a lockdown. Helioform has triggered an emergency protocol. On the streets below, the lights changed. The warm golden glow of the street lamps shifted to a harsh, strobing violet. The holographic advertisements that usually sold perfumes and vacations flickered and warped, transforming into jagged, aggressive shapes. "What is that?" Rylan asked, squinting against the glare. "Civic Halo," Sable whispered, her voice trembling. "It is a suppression system. It uses the city's light and sound lattice to induce sensory overload. It creates mass paranoia. It manipulates perception. It doesn't just blind you, it makes you see what they want you to see." As she spoke, the audio feeds from the ground changed. The roar of the crowd was drowned out by a high-frequency hum that vibrated in Rylan's teeth. "We have to get to the Senate Core Archive," Rylan said, wrestling the ship against a sudden gust of wind. "The Prime Authorization Ledger is there. The logs we released proved the massacre was staged, but they didn't prove who paid for it. The ledger has the money trail. It links EvaChain directly to the Helioform Board of Directors. Without it, they can claim rogue elements. With it, they are finished. The archive is under the central plaza," Kalith said. "Put us down on the roof of the History Museum. We will walk from there." "Walk?" Rylan looked at the chaos below. "Through that? We have no choice," Kalith said. "The airspace around the archive is a kill box." Rylan slammed the ship down on the museum roof. The landing gear groaned in protest. They scrambled out into the violet night, the air tasting of ozone and panic. As they ran toward the plaza, the civic halo effect hit them. It was subtle at first. Shadows seemed to stretch and grab at their ankles. The sound of their own footsteps echoed with a delay, making it sound like they were being followed. Then, the hallucinations began. Rylan looked at Kalith. For a second, her armor didn't look like obsidian plates. It looked like chitinous, dripping gore. Her face distorted, the golden eyes widening into abyssal pools, her mouth filled with needle teeth. She looked like the monster the propaganda posters had drawn. Rylan flinched, raising his arm defensively. "Rylan?" Kalith asked, reaching out. To Rylan, her hand looked like a claw reaching for his throat. He stumbled back, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Get back!" he shouted. Kalith froze. She blinked, shaking her head. To her, Rylan did not look like a man. He looked like a handler. He wore the gray suit of the torture technicians. He held a neural whip in his hand, coiled and ready to strike. The fear on his face looked like sadistic anticipation. "No," Caleth hissed, dropping into a defensive crouch. "You will not chain me again." Sable grabbed them both by the shoulders. "Stop it!" Sable screamed. "It is the system. It is hacking your visual cortex. Look at me." Rylan looked at Sable. She flickered. One moment she was the bartender, the next she was Isolde Kane, laughing. "It is not real," Sable yelled, slapping Rylan hard across the face. The pain was sharp, grounding. "Focus on the pain." Rylan blinked. The monster vanished. Caleth stood there, looking terrified and confused. "Caleth," Rylan gasped. "It's me. It's Rylan. The Moss, remember?" Caleth squeezed her eyes shut. She reached out blindly. "Touch me," she commanded. Rylan grabbed her hand. He squeezed the armored fingers, feeling the solid, unyielding reality of her. "Signal," Rylan said. "2 squeezes," Caleth replied, her voice shaking. "It means safe." They held onto that signal like a lifeline as they pushed through the plaza. The crowd around them was tearing itself apart. People were fighting shadows, screaming at invisible attackers. The civic halo was turning the population into a weapon against itself. They reached the archive entrance. It was a massive blast door guarded by automated turrets. Caleth didn't hesitate. She moved with the fluid grace that no AI could replicate. Dodging the tracking fire, she tore the cover off the manual override panel and shorted the wires with her own armor's static discharge. The doors groaned open. They slipped inside, leaving the madness of the violet light behind. The archive was cool, silent, and lit by the soft blue of data stacks. "We have 10 minutes before they breach the door," Sable said, running to the central terminal. She jacked in her datapad. "I need to bypass the biometric lock." Rylan and Caleth stood guard at the entrance. The silence was heavy. "Are you okay?" Rylan asked, looking at Caleth. "I saw you as one of them," she whispered. "For a moment, I wanted to kill you. I saw you as a monster." Rylan admitted. "I wanted to run, but you didn't." She said, "No, I didn't." Sable cursed from the console. "They have updated the firewall. I can't slice it remotely. I have to bridge the connection manually." She opened the panel beneath the terminal. Sparks showered down. "I can do it," Rylan said, stepping forward. "No," Sable said, pushing him back. "You have to fly the ship, and she has to be the symbol. I'm just the librarian. Let me do this." She jammed her hands into the live circuitry. Her body jerked as the current hit her, but the screen turned green. "Access granted," Sable yelled. The Prime Authorization ledger began to download. The names scrolled by: senators, CEOs, generals. The entire architecture of the war was laid bare. Suddenly, the blast doors blew inward. Helioform security stormed the room. They weren't using stunners this time. They were using pulse rifles. "Cover fire!" Caleth roared, flipping a heavy data table to create a barricade. She returned fire with a stolen plasma pistol, her aim precise. Rylan fired blindly over the table, just trying to keep their heads down. The download bar crawled. 90%. "Sable, we have to move!" Rylan screamed. "I can't disconnect," Sable shouted back, her voice strained. "The data integrity will collapse if I pull the plug before it seals." A pulse bolt slammed into the terminal, inches from Sable's head. Shrapnel tore into her shoulder, and she cried out, collapsing against the console. "Sable!" Rylan scrambled toward her. "Stay back!" Sable gasped, blood staining her gray tunic. "It's almost done. 98, 99. She slammed her hand onto the transfer key. "Done!" she wheezed, pulling the data chip. She tossed it to Rylan. It slid across the polished floor. Rylan grabbed it. We go. Now. Sable looked at the door. The security forces were advancing. She looked at her wound. It was bad. You go, Sable said. She pulled a heavy pistol from her belt, a weapon Rylan hadn't even known she was carrying. I'm not leaving you, Rylan said. Don't be an idiot. Voss, Sable smiled, blood on her teeth. I can't run. I'll just slow you down. Besides, I always wanted to die dramatically, none it fits my character arc. Sable, please, Kalith said, her voice cracking. Live honestly, Sable whispered. That's the only revenge that matters. She turned and opened fire on the advancing troops, drawing their attention. Run! Rylan grabbed Kalith's arm. They ran toward the emergency service lift. As the doors closed, Rylan saw Sable standing amidst the sparks, firing with one hand, laughing defiantly at the encroaching dark. The lift shot upward. Rylan leaned his head against the metal wall, tears streaming down his face. Kalith stood silent, her hand resting on his shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight. They reached the roof. The courier ship was there, battered but waiting. But they were not alone. Blocking the path to the ship was a Dominion shuttle, and standing on the ramp was Marshal Vorun. He was not wearing his helmet. His face was old, tired, and lined with a grief that looked like erosion. He held a heavy disruptor rifle, but it was pointed at the ground. Marshal, Kalith said, stepping out of the lift. Kalith, Vorun said. His voice was swept away by the wind for a moment. You have the ledger. We do, she said. Then you know, Vorun said. You know that I signed the authorization for the fleet maneuvers. You know I took their money. I know they blackmailed you, Kalith said. I know they have your daughter in a readjustment camp. Vorun flinched. You always were too clever for your own good. He took a step forward. I have a proposition. Kalith, the Senate is collapsing. The helioform board is in panic. If you destroy that chip, if you let the coalition burn itself down, we can step into the vacuum. What are you offering? Kalith asked. Leadership, Vorun said. I will step down. You will be the High Marshal. We will unite the systems under the Ver banner. We will bring order. No more politics. No more lies. Just strength. Kalith looked at him. She looked at the city burning below. You want me to be a tyrant, she said. I want you to be a ruler, Vorun shouted. Freedom is messy. Kalith, look at them. They are animals. They need a strong hand. Kalith shook her head slowly. Freedom without responsibility is tyranny. Vorun, but order without consent is just a prison with better food. I will not trade one cage for another. Vorun looked at her for a long time. He raised the rifle. Then I cannot let you leave, he said softly. Kalith did not draw her weapon. She simply looked at him. Then shoot me, Marshal. But know that you are shooting the only person who still believes you are a warrior. Vorun's hand trembled. He looked at the rifle. He looked at Kalith. He looked at the burning city. He let out a roar of frustration and threw the rifle across the roof. It clattered against the vents. Go! Vorun spat. Before I remember, I am a coward. Rylan and Kalith ran past him. As they boarded the courier ship, Rylan looked back. Vorun was sitting on the ramp of his shuttle, head in his hands, watching the empire he had served crumble into ash. They launched. As soon as they cleared the interference of the civic halo, Rylan slotted the chip into the comms array. Sending it now, Rylan said. Maximum gain. Every channel, the prime authorization ledger hit the interstellar network. It was not a leak. It was a flood. Documents, bank transfers, video logs, emails. It all poured into the public domain. The names of the helioform executives were plastered across every screen in the sector. The proof was absolute. The war was a product. The massacre was a commercial. But Helioform had one last move. As Ryland steered the ship toward the jump point, a new signal overrode the local broadcast. "Attention, citizens," a smooth, synthetic voice announced. "Do not believe the data dump. It is a fabrication created by the fugitive Ryland Voss, who is currently under the psionic thrall of the alien Calith." A video clip appeared on the ship's monitor. It was doctored footage from the reliquary. It showed Calith leaning over Ryland, her hand on his throat. But the audio had been changed. Instead of comfort, it sounded like she was chanting a command. It made Ryland look glazed, passive, enslaved. "She has used pheromonal control to enslave a human citizen." The voice continued. "He is not acting of his own free will. He is a victim of alien seduction." Ryland stared at the screen. "They are trying to take my agency," he said, furious. "They are trying to make me into a victim so they can dismiss the evidence." Calith stood up. She walked to the comm station. "Turn on the camera," she said. Ryland looked at her. "We are fugitives. If we broadcast, they can lock onto us." "Turn it on," she repeated. Ryland activated the camera. Calith reached up and unclasped her armor. The heavy obsidian plates fell to the deck with a clang. She stood there in her undersuit, stripped of the ceremonial shell that defined her caste. She looked smaller, yet infinitely more dangerous. She looked into the lens. "My name is Calith," she said. "I am not a monster. I am not a queen. I am a woman." She pulled Ryland into the frame. She did not grab him. She offered her hand, and he took it. "They say I enslaved him," Calith said, her voice steady. "They say I used tricks to bend his mind. They say this because they cannot imagine a world where a human and a Vare could stand together without chains." She looked at Ryland. "Tell them," she said. Ryland looked at the camera. He thought of the moss. He thought of the fear. He thought of the moment in the reactor room. "I am not a victim," Ryland said clearly. "I am a man who saw the truth, and I chose it." Calith squeezed his hand. She looked back at the galaxy. "I chose him," she said. "I did not own him. Desire is not conquest. Love is not a shackle. It is the only thing that makes us free." She cut the feed. The effect was instantaneous. The narrative that Helioform had tried to construct, the story of the savage alien and the helpless human, dissolved. The public saw two people standing in a battered ship, tired, scared, and undeniably real. The city of Astervane went dark. The civic halo system crashed as the engineers in the power plant, seeing the broadcast, pulled the breakers. The violet light died. The dawn broke over the city, gray and cold and honest. Below, the security forces stopped fighting. They turned their backs on the Senate doors. They arrested Isolde Kane as she tried to board a private transport. They dragged the Helioform executives out of their penthouses. It was over. In the days that followed, the galaxy rearranged itself. The Dominion reformists contacted Calith. They offered her the throne Varun had vacated. They wanted her to lead the new era. She declined. "I cannot lead you," she told the council. "If I sit on a throne, I become another symbol. I become a statue. I will be an advocate. I will hunt down every last restraint collar in the systems. I will break them, but I will not rule." The coalition offered Ryland a full pardon and a position as the director of oversight. He declined. "I don't want to wear a suit," he told them. "I don't want to sign papers. I just want to fly my ship." They met on the bridge of the courier craft one last time before departure. The ship was repaired, fueled, and stocked. "Where are we going?" Ryland asked. Calith held up a small object. It was a ring, rough and dark. Made of metal she had melted down with a plasma torch. It was the remains of the shackle that had bound her wrists. "Somewhere where there are no maps," she said. "Somewhere where we can be just us." She slid the ring onto her finger. It was not jewelry. It was a scar she wore on purpose, a reminder of what she had broken. She looked at Rylan. Her eyes were soft. The golden fire banked into glowing embers. "Are you ready to be nobody?" she asked. Rylan smiled. He took her hand, interlacing his fingers with hers. "I'm ready to be unshackled," he said. Sable's final message blinked on the console, a delayed transmission she had set before the end. "Truth is heavy." The text read, "Carry it together." Kaleth punched the coordinates. The stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of infinite possibility. They did not look back. They jumped into the dark, not as heroes, not as legends, but as two people who had looked at the cage and chosen the sky. The engine roared, a sound like a deep, triumphant breath, and then they were gone.